Culture, is it a literary device? Was captured and framed in podcast 122. It is also verbalized in 14 chapters in publication 233 in ISBN 978-976-96-68973. Undoubtedly, culture is a literary device because it is encompassed with literary devices, which are techniques which I have employed to express my ideas and enhance my writing. In the scheme of things, it should be noted that literary devices highlight important concepts in this text, strengthen this narrative, and help me connect to the characters and themes. However, it is noted that these devices that I employed in this text serve a wide range of purposes in literature. For example, some of the devices employed in this piece will influence some global citizens on an intellectual level, while the remainder will be influenced on a more emotional level. It is because of this explanation, that I have posited this view. Culture, is it a literary device? Importantly, and contextually speaking, this way of thinking came to the fore because I have unearthed styles of literary devices which were extracted from the information gathered through research I have conducted on this matter. These devices include elements such as theoretically, politically, and empirically engaged cultural analysis, which provides a foundation so that there is concentration upon the political dynamics of contemporary culture, its historical foundations, defining traits, conflicts, and contingencies, each serving a different purpose. The aforesaid reasoning is contingent on some tools employed and navigated by cultural studies practitioners, included the excerpts from their writings, which are deemed literary devices. At this juncture, I have literally established context, at the same time mimicking and or comporting myself like cultural studies researchers. For example, I have investigated how cultural practices relate to wider systems of power associated with or operating through social phenomena such as ideology, class structures, national formations, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, and generation. What was very remarkable, in this space, metaphorically and theoretically speaking, I have ascertained if and whether cultural studies had eyes to see would view cultures not as fixed, bounded, stable, and discrete entities, but rather as constantly interacting and changing sets of practices and processes. The aforesaid discovery inspired me to introduce the definition of cultural studies. According to Wikipedia, I quote, "Cultural studies as a field of theoretically, politically, and empirically engaged cultural analysis that concentrates upon the political dynamics of contemporary culture, its historical foundations, defining traits, conflicts, and contingencies," end quote, is very critical to this discourse. I must confess, what is also very uniquely interesting about this posited theory is the fact that it is also part of the cultural studies conversation, which is an academic field of study which is built on certain theories and concepts that guide scholars in their work. Through my academic lens, I suppose, given its specificity and veracity and the circumstances of this conversation, tangentially speaking, cultural studies deals with culture as a part of everyday life. However, on this occasion, this clarification certainly helped me to ascertain whether culture, is it a literary device, and can it comport itself as a literary device? Importantly, all of the theoretical constructs mentioned in this space when combined together, adds value to the discourse, and by extension, they allow configuration to take place. This, to my mind, is a nuance which also engage my cognitive skills and my cognition to the extent that I have accepted the fact that cultural studies can be employed as a tool in things. I must confess that in my capacity as an author, cinematographer, media arts specialist, licensed cultural practitioner, podcaster, and publisher, to proffer tools in this space becomes an instrumental component, especially managing this cultural space and conducting an analysis of cultural studies help in the validating of this conversation. Culture, is it a literary device? Another aspect of this course has to do with David Whyte's theory. Whyte is plausibly suggesting that, I quote, a tool in things is like race, gender, or disability don't really exist but are instead concepts or beliefs that people have created in order to organize their cultures or societies. This is not to suggest that there aren't biological differences between men and women or that there aren't variations in skin pigmentation. Rather, it simply means that outside of social systems, these things have no meaning. End quote. The more that I research this topic, I have recognized that this environment is conducive for an analysis on how and when this tool can be deployed by practitioners, because this places them in a better position to determine whether they are better able to point to larger themes, ideas, and meaning in their conversation or piece of writing. Given the logistical specificity of this conversation, suggests that hypothetically and contextually speaking, I am now better able to navigate this discourse in this environment, especially culture. Is it a literary device? The aforesaid reasoning has activated my cognitive skills to the extent that I advance the most important question. I quote, what technique is used in culture to help the practitioners achieve his or her purpose? End quote. This exercise helped me to write as someone who knows absolutely nothing of whether culture is it a literary device. That said, in light of this admission, I suppose that to insert quoted portions from a longer conversation of some cultural theorists, such as Tony Bennett, Paul Gilroy, Lawrence Grossberg, Stuart Hall, Megan Morris, Paul Willis, Michel Foucault, Jacques Derrida, Anthony Giddens, and Roland Barthes, invariably show you how I feel and think, and what I want you to understand and remember about culture and whether it is a literary device. Come with me and let us examine some of these extracts. Tony Bennett's work, I quote, has been important in literary and popular culture studies, especially as a founder of the Australian School of Cultural Policy Studies, end quote. Paul Gilroy argues, I quote, for black people, forms of black persons being included from representation in the traditional political apparatus, end quote. Lawrence Grossberg, I quote, thinks that cultural studies and politics are certainly intertwined, end quote. Stuart Hall, I quote, became one of the main proponents of reception theory and developed his theory of encoding and decoding, end quote. Megan Morris, I quote, is the most significant and innovative living Australian cultural historian, end quote, according to Chris Healy. Paul Willis argues, I quote, education reproduces the type of workforce required by capitalism, but not intentionally, end quote. Michel Foucault, I quote, was interested in power and social change, end quote. Jacques Derrida, I quote, contends that there are no self-sufficient units of meaning in a text because individual words or sentences in a text can only be properly understood in terms of how they fit into the larger structure of the text and language itself, end quote. Anthony Giddens advocates, I quote, that for people living in traditional societies, individual actions are not matters that have to be extensively considered and thought about, end quote. I quote, traditionally, Roland Barthes was regarded as a structuralist, and he was believed to emphasize structure and form instead of content or meaning, end quote. Now that we have examined the aforesaid extracts, I am cognizant of the fact that these practitioners who contributed to this frame question statement, culture, is it a literary device, implies that there is a technique tool used in culture which can help the practitioners achieve his or her purpose. Additionally, I am now provided with valuable information. At the same time, I am guided to unearth facts about these practitioners and how they provided theories that were formulated to explain, predict, and understand phenomena, and, in many cases, to challenge and extend existing knowledge within the limits of critical bounding assumptions. Most importantly, though, all of the above-mentioned reasoned explanations and extracts added together within this theoretical framework is also part of the structure which helped and or supported the theory of this research study. Therefore, as a result of navigating this frame statement question, it drew my attention to the fact that there are many techniques used in culture to help the practitioners achieve his or her purpose. Undoubtedly, culture is a literary device because it is encompassed with literary devices which are techniques that I employ to express my ideas and enhance my writing. The literary devices which I employed highlighted the important concepts in this text, strengthened my narrative, and helped me connect to the characters and themes. However, it is noted that these devices employed in this text serve a wide range of purposes in literature. Some of the devices employed in this piece influence some global citizens on an intellectual level and an emotional level. It's because of this recent explanation that I have posited this view. Culture, is it a literary device? Importantly, and contextually speaking, this way of thinking came to the fore because I have unearthed styles of literary devices which were extracted from the information gathered through research I have conducted on this matter. This topic was examined through many lenses, including a textual analysis lens, and concretized via the numerous theories espoused by the various cultural theorists. This conversation was captured and framed in podcast 122. Culture, is it a literary device? Was also verbalized in 14 chapters in publication 233 in ISBN 978-976-96-68973.